Guys, welcome to Hip Use History. It's so glad that you showed up for another episode of The Learnin'. In this episode, guys, we're going to briefly talk about the event called Shays Rebellion, really a critical turning point in American history, so pay attention. We're not going to go 15 layers under the covers, but just kind of skim the surface, and certainly if you're writing a paper or you have a big presentation on Shays Rebellion, this is the starting point, not the ending point. So we have to frame things out. It's 1786. We're in the last years of the Articles of Confederation, and you really need to know the major ideas behind the Articles of Confederation to understand Shays Rebellion. So in class, I do this a lot. I'll just kind of grab a little piece of a paper here, and I'll remind you that the definition of federalism is when we take power and then we divide that power, and some of that power goes to the federal government and some goes to the state government, so we have this sort of balance. Under the Articles, we divide it a little bit differently. Rather than doing what's called dual federalism, or kind of evenly split federalism, I'm going to just kind of go federalism is the division of power between the federal government and the states. So this is the federal government's power. And we certainly understand why it's like this if you're coming out of the tyranny of Great Britain. The federal government wasn't trusted. We did not want a strong federal government. And certainly if you watch the AOC lecture I've done, you'll learn that it's inflexible and there's no power to tax. There's no monetary system and there's no president. There's no court system. There's no coining money. So there's all of these kind of intrinsic weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation that were really, entrusted to the states. It's a confederation rather than a strong union. So in a sense, we're playing with the other states on the team, but we're not really a unit and a team yet. So Shays Rebellion is seen as kind of like the flashlight of those weaknesses, really kind of illustrating to America that this wasn't going to work out. We needed a stronger union. And it really is coinciding with the Philadelphia Constitutional Convention of 1787. So it's going to work really well with, the idea that we need a stronger government, at least coming out of Philadelphia. Really basic background. Daniel Shay is a revolutionary soldier. He fought valiantly in a couple battles, and when he went back to western Pennsylvania to return to his life of farming, with lead in his leg, he was owed money, and he really was never paid back. You have to remember that all of the debt of the Revolutionary War is on the back of the states that fought it. And Massachusetts, more than any other state, man, they got some debt. They got bad debt. So Daniel Shay, number one, comes back to no paycheck. Number two, he comes back to all these bills, all these tax bills, and all these notices that, he's in debt and he's got to go to court. Really, there's root causes of that too, and it has a lot to do with the demand for hard currency from Europe and trade routes and such. And the merchants that lived in kind of the richer part of Massachusetts, the eastern seaboard, like Boston and such, they're turning over, their need for hard currency to their customers out in western Pennsylvania, and they don't have hard currency. They don't have cash. They would trade with goods and things like, pigs and chickens and stuff like that. And the merchants in Boston, they don't want pigs and chickens. They want they want money. So they start racking up all these bills in western Pennsylvania, and then the courts start taking action. They start, doing bankruptcy and taking people's farms and kicking them out of their homes and yada, yada, yada. And now I start to be a western Pennsylvania farmer, and I'm thinking in my head, didn't Jefferson write about this? Didn't Jefferson say that if you have tyranny in your life and you don't really have power over your government and you feel as though you're being taxed without representation and that your voice isn't being heard, that you have a right to do what? Bam! You have a right to revolt. So Shay organizes people like him, other ex-soldiers and people in debt in western Pennsylvania, and they start to use that mob power to shut down courthouses, to stop proceedings, to stop them from collecting money and declaring bankruptcies. They're taking direct action, and they end up going to the eastern seaboard, to the capital, to demanding that their livelihood is protected. Thomas Jefferson even wrote a letter, he was ambassador to France at this point, where he said that, the tree of liberty should be replenished with the blood of patriot and tyrants, that it's nature's natural manure. So he likes this concept, but not everybody is like TJ. They're not all anti-feds. You got people that are really worried about the confiscation of power, worried about mob rule, worried about constant revolution. Guys like Sam Adams, you know Sam Adams beer? Sam Adams kind of facilitated the passage of something called the Riot Act during this. And he basically is going to suspend habeas corpus. He's going to throw these bums in jail without notice, without trial. He was even for the death penalty for these guys, and 2 of them actually ended up hanging from the nooses. At the end of the day, it's going to be a failure. The Shays Rebellion doesn't work out. Shay was finally arrested. He was pardoned later down the road. It's really not about the specificity of the outcome of that event, but more of kind of the illustration of the weaknesses of the articles. This is really a wake-up call. I'm not going to say a wake-up call for most Americans. Most Americans don't care, or most Americans might sympathize with Shay, but it's certainly a wake-up call for those who hold power, those who own land, those merchants and those manufacturers. I didn't mention this before, but the army that crushed Daniel Shay was a private army financed by the merchants because they want to make sure that their bills are going to get paid. At the end of the day, the big lesson, though, is that those ruling class people are going to use this episode to convince Americans that we really need a stronger government. If we don't have a stronger government, we're going to have constant revolt, constant revolution, constant blood in the streets. Babies will be eating babies. It would be bad. So Shays Rebellion illustrates the weakness of the articles and launches the United States into the Constitutional Convention, where we're going to build a stronger constitution and hence a stronger union. So there you go. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Shays Rebellion. You shouldn't smoke because it causes bad things to happen to you. All right, guys, where attention goes, energy flows. Pay attention all the time in this world because it's the only weapon that you wield all the time. We'll see you next time. Check out the links below. There's really cool links. You're going to learn so much. I can't wait for the learning next time. We'll see you then.